Wellington, who is an alum from Boulder. He's here with us today to talk about cover letters. He has a couple good tips. So I'm going to let him introduce himself, and then we're going to get started. Take it away.
Hi everyone, so like Natalie said, my name is Rob Wellington. I did 2 years up in Boulder with the I Have a Dream Foundation. And about this time last year, I'm sure I'm where a lot of you were at, where the idea of applying for jobs was very much in my mind. And part of that process was doing a lot of cover letter writing. I think I wrote around 40 cover letters during my job search process. So I've had some experience with it. I know what to do and what not to do. And I thought I would just share some like basic things about cover letters that, like, if you're at the point of I feel like I could turn this into a company, all the way to I have no idea where to start, what is a cover letter. These are some ways that you can either really polish it up or dive into it.
Great. So you have like a couple tips here. So why don't we start with your first big tip?
Cool. So I think the big thing with cover letters that sounds basic, but it's actually really important, is formatting. Formatting is key. And it turns out that according to the Bloomberg Business Report, if you're applying to Harvard and you're applying to Delta Airlines, you're 4.5 times more likely to get the position at Harvard than you are at Delta. So you want to make yourself stand out, and you want to make yourself sound really good so that you increase your odds of getting that job, whether it be at Delta or wherever you end up going. And if you don't have a formatted cover letter, that's a really easy way for an employer to be like, they don't care. So the first thing you want is to have your full legal name and contact information at the top. They want to be able to get a hold of you. You want them to be able to get a hold of you. Make sure you have your address, your phone number, all those good things. Your recipient's name and contact information. Now, sometimes this can be a little bit tough because you're filling out a form, so you might not know an exact person to put in that recipient's name, but at least put like hiring committee or human resources or something like that.
Rob, can I interrupt you just for a second?
Yeah.
I have a question. What about like if you something I struggle with, if you don't know whether it's like a Miss or a Mrs., is there one you should always go with, or do you just write their full name? You know
When
what I'm
I
talking
fall in that situation, I usually go with full name.
Okay.
Or, I mean, if you know the person's name, you might have some way to contact them.
Yeah.
And you could be like, hey, I'm applying to this job, and then maybe you could get like a sense from their voice of whether it's Mr. or Mrs. But that's a tough one.
Yeah. Okay.
Or
Sometimes I struggle,
you have a
especially.
PhD, so then you put like Mrs. instead of Doctor. You know, like there are those weird pitfalls. So I guess a full name it's formal. It can keep
But
you
it's
out of that
probably
trouble.
the safest bet. Yeah, and I would also say probably looking at the website, because sometimes you can tell, they might have like employer information about like, profiles for each of their people. And then, yeah, I don't know. Between Miss and Mrs., it's sometimes hard to know. So I think you're right with just saying the flame is probably for the best.
But I'm sure you're not the first person to make that guess. So, if you get it wrong, it happens.
Yeah. Okay, sorry to interrupt. Keep going.
Oh, no problem. So date is big, because sometimes things will like mess up on the computer, and maybe like you submitted it by the deadline, but the computer didn't go through. If you have a date, you can show like, hey, I wrote this before it was due, and that can be like a good thing to fall back on.
Okay.
Introductory paragraph. Just a little bit about like why you're interested, who are you, and like what is the job about. The 2 body paragraphs should really be arguing in favor of why you should get the job. And this could be like, maybe you have skills that are really close to it. Maybe the job is about something you're really passionate about. Like you don't necessarily have a background in it, but you're excited about it. Maybe you think like the culture of the company is really similar to a culture that matches the way that you think or would like to interact with people in a company. So those can all be ways to like structure those 2 kind of medium in the middle paragraphs. A closing paragraph. Again, like really, let them know that you're interested in where you're at. And if possible, again, this requires knowing a person's name, so it doesn't always work anymore, but if possible, say like, by next week, I will email you to make sure you got all my materials, or like give them some sort of action step. And then once they see that you've done that action step, it shows that you've got follow-through. And then a closing salutation. The kind of the generic one is sincerely. Sometimes I like to be a little more friendly and say like all the best, or I really look forward to meeting you. I guess that kind of is a personality thing.
Yeah. No, yeah, I agree. I do sincerely for the most part, but I think, and always thank you. Thank you for this opportunity, or thank you for considering this request. But yeah, all the best. That's a good one. I hadn't thought about that. I also would say something in terms of those 1 to 2 paragraphs. I think it's really crucial that people, you want to look at what the mission statement is of the organization, or what their, whatever their message is from their website, or if there's articles about them online. I mean, you want to do your research before you write this cover letter, because it's really your chance to show who you are. Unlike your resume, which just shows like all the great things you've done, this is your time to say why this company or this organization fits you so well and why you fit it so well. So it's like that double edge. You got to do both and really make it clear that both of those things are going to be hit if they hire you.
So I think you have a little template that they could see to like make sure they've got all the points, right?
Yes. Let me share this screen with you. Okay. Yeah, so what Rob just talked about was make sure to have your full legal name and contact information. I cannot tell you how many times I've actually seen people who forget to put their name. It's embarrassing, and we make these sorts of mistakes, but definitely make sure that your name is at the top and your contact information. You want to know how to get in touch with you. And Rob, I know we talked about this one time, but if you have maybe a really old AOL account or a Yahoo account that has a name that maybe isn't the best to be putting as your please contact me at who knows what, some like, I don't know, some email that maybe isn't professional, that you wouldn't want them. Like, I think my old email used to be covergirl308. I wouldn't want people to know that on my cover letter, so you want to make sure you have some sort of account or email that is professional and formal for people to contact you at. And then, Rob, you also said the date. An introduction salutation, dear Mr., Mrs., Doctor. Make sure you try and find out who the person is that you're, addressing this letter to, if possible. And then in the introductory paragraphs, you want to kind of introduce yourself and say why you're so interested in this position. The body paragraphs, as Rob said, arguing in favor of you getting the job. Make sure to really hit on your skill set. See, what are those translatable skills that you can add to that cover letter, and then a closing paragraph that kind of restates what you've said in the introductory salutation, but with probably, I would say, a little more kind of strength and oomph. And then your closing salutation with sincerely, all the best, or thank you. All right.
So when Natalie was talking about those those middle paragraphs, she actually did a really great segue to the next tip I have, and that's have a professional rather than academic tone, and not too informal either. Like, try to sound like yourself, but don't be like too academic or too informal. And she's got 3 different like ways that you could phrase an opening sentence in a cover letter. And after she reads all 3 of them, we'll kind of talk about like, is this one good? Like, why wouldn't you do that? Why would you do that?
Great. All right, let me share these again. Okay. So, I wish to convey my acute interest in obtaining this neoteric position at your magnanimous establishment. I mean, I'm basically open to working any position available at your trendy firm. I'm thrilled to apply for the newly created position at this great firm. Did you come up with these?
Yeah, I did. The
They're
bottom
good.
one, the I'm excited to like apply to your newly created position. That was a canned one on the internet, and then I was like, how could I like tweak it to both sound like really academic and then not as formal?
Yeah, that's
Um,
good.
and I think like Natalie rating the first one is the most obvious reason you don't want to go too academic in your writing. It's really hard to read, and like you don't want the person hiring you to be stumbling over the way that you write in your cover letter. Um, like if they have to take the time to open up a thesaurus and figure out what you're trying to say, they don't really have time to be doing that for every cover letter. It also sounds maybe a little bit canned. Like you're not totally sure what the job is, so you're just throwing in some big words because it sounds good, and you kind of sound like you know what you're talking about, but do you really know what the job is? Um, I would say the one time that maybe the way that first sentence would be okay is like if you are interested in becoming a professor someday, maybe a cover letter would sound like that. But outside of academia, that would be really awkward. I think the other thing that might tell people who are looking at your cover letter is like, hmm, he's not very concise or clear in his or her writing. And in business emails or reports or things like that, you really want to be able to get your point across directly and easy to understand. So that's why I would avoid the first one. The middle one, it gets at the idea of like what you're trying to go for. But even if you know the person really well who you're applying to the job with, it just doesn't sound like you're totally taking the job seriously. Um, Again, if you
Well,
were to
also you
write,
don't want to have like, I mean, that's maybe what you would say conversationally, but when you're writing, you need to have sort of a formality to what you're saying. So to say, I mean, comma, or basically, it's not what you want to present yourself on paper as.
yeah, it's kind of awkward. I would say even like in business conversation, you're probably not going to say that a lot to like your boss, but I guess it depends on how cool of a boss you have.
Yeah, depends on what kind of trendy place you're working at.
I really like the final one. I'm thrilled to apply for the newly created position at this great firm because it is like you're excited. You're thrilled about this. It's not just, oh, I'm applying for this job. Thanks for like considering me. You actually show that you're excited about it. It's pretty easy to read. Um, you throw in some things to make it sound, butter them up a little bit. This great firm. Um, but it's just direct, easy. It doesn't sound like you're trying to sound like somebody you're not. And I could definitely like see myself using that in everyday conversation. What do you
Mhm.
think, Natalie?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I would say that's a good kind of summary or like ending closing statement. And I would say you want to make sure that you have very firmly established before then, either the name of the organization you're applying to or like, given them clues that you do know what they do, what they're about, that it's not totally blanket statements. Because if you do end with this great firm and you're not saying their name, I have seen cover letters that are very clearly like they just sent the exact same thing out to 15 different places. They did not read anything about my organization or what I'm trying to do. And so as an employer, I look at it and I'm like, it does fit, but do they know? I mean, they used a bunch of great statements that are ending with this firm or all that you do at your organization. There's no content to what it is that we do. So you just want to make sure if you do use that kind of language that you have established who they are and why you fit them and why they would fit you.
I like that. That's good.
All right. Are we on to the next tip?
Yeah.
Great.
So this one I think can be really tricky, especially with a lot of us just coming out of school recently. We've had a little bit of, experience from AmeriCorps. but we're really coming out with a lot of academic experience and not as much professional experience. And so it's very easy in the cover letter to be able to talk about what you don't have or what you're missing instead of focusing on your strengths and the potential that you do bring. And that's really what you do want to bring out, is that you do have these strengths and you do have potential. So Natalie's going to look at two different ways that this person phrased their experience as an administrative assistant, and they're trying to get a teaching job.
Okay. Hold on, let me just pull this up. There we go. So while I only have experience with administrative tasks, I am confident I can learn classroom management strategies. During my time as an administrative assistant, I managed the schedules and project deadlines of 15 employees on my team. I would do this for my students in the upcoming school year.
So the first one, I give them props for being honest. They're being honest that they don't have experience teaching. But unfortunately, they basically directly say in their statement, I haven't taught. I don't have experience teaching. If you're applying to a job where you need to have a skill, you never want to say that you don't have that skill. It also kind of makes me curious when I read it about why they're confident that they could learn classroom management strategies. They don't really talk about like something they had to learn while they were doing this other job, or like they don't talk about managing people. Yeah, it's just I don't understand where the leap from administrative tasks to teaching comes in. But it's really easy to fall into that pitfall because they haven't taught. The second one I really like because I'm guessing in most teaching applications, classroom management is going to be a requirement. The word management will be like a key term you want to throw in. And they throw in managed here. They don't say that it's classroom management, but they do specifically point to that they have like, organized other people's schedules. So that's really great that they were able to throw in a keyword even if it wasn't classroom management. I think having the numbers there also makes me buy it a little more, that they have potential. Like, oh, they've worked with 15 people. I could see them maybe working with like 20 students. Like, they know how to manage a number of people. And again, it focuses on their strengths. They're good at managing a schedule and keeping track of what different people are doing, very similarly to probably what they'll have to do as a teacher. Anything on that, Natalie, or like, do you like the first one? I mean, you can push back if you want.
No, actually, I agree with you. I mean, you look at it and you're like, oh, they're confident, and then you think, well, let me read the sentence again. So I do agree with you. And I have to say, I would probably fall into that trap and say, well, I want to be honest with them, I want to tell them, but that I'm really like I'm eager and excited to learn this. But I don't think it works. I think in the second one, during my time as an administrative assistant, I managed the schedules and project deadlines of 15 employees on my team. I will do this for my students in the upcoming school year. That's a really good sentence. I would say, or paragraph. I would say you maybe want to add just maybe a little more detail, like that, in a classroom you want to assume that it might be a little chaotic at times, and depending on the grade or, the school, there might be, you just want to assume that they need someone that can really manage people in a very direct way. If you do have experience, or if you have like an anecdote or a story you can tell, or maybe one more sentence that kind of sums up that you can handle a lot of either information or people coming at you, or you're able to multitask. You're really good at multitasking while also keeping your attention to detail. If there's something that you can say that kind of sums up that even though you haven't been in a classroom before, you're very confident that you could handle it. So that would be my 2 cents.
Fabulous. Well, that is another amazing segue into my next point, Natalie.
Oh, great.
'Cause it's all about storytelling. Um, and I think something that can really kind of personalize your cover letter. It again shows that you didn't just like write, 40 cover letters and send the same one with a couple word changes to 40 different people, is to have a story and it's somewhere in like your intro paragraph and then bring it back in a little bit at the end, but a story that kind of bookends your experience and also like shows how this job has a personal connection to you, that it's not just, well, I need a paycheck, and this would be really nice to have a consistent job. Like, why do you care about what you're getting the paycheck from? So Natalie has a pretty cool astronaut story for you to hear about.
All right. Okay. Ever since seeing the moon in the sky, night sky, for the first time as a child, I've always dreamed of seeing what Earth would look like from space and have had a lifelong goal of becoming an astronaut. As I look out at the stars, I am excited that I will be involved in furthering our knowledge of the universe, just as I have been ever since I first knew what space was.
So, in that first one, I mean, he takes us all the way back to his childhood. That space exploration and being an astronaut is something he's excited about, and I think that's really cool as an employer to realize that this isn't just like, oh, you decided to apply to this job on a whim. It's something you've like really dedicated your life to. Um, and in this case, I think it's really cool because a lot of us say like we want to be astronauts or firefighters or whatever when we grow up, but this person actually follows through on that. So that's kind of neat. And again, it shows that you took the time in your cover letter to put in a story that personalizes it. You couldn't really just change some keywords here and make it fit with another job. Um, like the story is very specific to the job that you're applying for, and I think that's really great that they've taken the time to do that. And then again, like with that last sentence, as I look out at the stars, that could be like, your maybe second to last sentence, and it really bookends nicely with this lifelong passion of going up into space, and then being like, if I get this job, like I'll meet my lifelong goal. This job directly relates to that. So I think that's pretty neat. Might not work quite as well with some jobs, but hey, like if you can bring it out, bring it out.
Yeah, and I think the one thing you wrote in it, the lifelong goal, I think that's a really good thing to put in. I mean, if you have found a job that directly relates to something that you were really passionate about, you want to use those kinds of words like, lifelong goal, or this is my passion, or I have, always dreamed of participating in this kind of organization, or, furthering this cause, whatever it is, or that you've always wanted to teach your whole life. I mean, those are the kind of things that you want to really make sure you add that in and emphasize, because they want to see that you're really passionate about what you're going to do with them.
Yeah, and I mean, I think in a way it's also more fun to write a cover letter that has some stories and personalizes it a little bit. If you're just sticking to the rote, I can do this, I'm good at this job is great, after you write enough of them, you'll kind of get sick of it. So adding in your own personal touch can keep that writing process fresh and exciting for you, and if it's fresh and exciting for you, chances are it's also going to be fresh and exciting for the person reading it. So before we go to our last tip, which is kind of general about all cover letters, I thought we could look at one that I actually wrote. Disclaimer, I didn't get the job. It did get me into an interview, so it got me that far, but I didn't get the job with this cover letter. And am I pulling it up, Natalie? I forget.
Oh yeah, sorry, because if you talk about it, it'll show up on your screen.
Or is it showing up?
Yes.
Great. So as you can see at the top, we have my contact information and my full name. Robert Wellington, 22 Pennsylvania Street, Denver, 80203, my phone number. And then at the time I was doing the internship, that was my email. And again, it's not one of those like joecool@gmail.com. It's, you know, relatively professional. Then we have the address of where I'm applying to, Colorado Department of Education, Exceptional Student Services Unit, 201 East Colfax Avenue, Denver, 80203. So in this case, like, I didn't know a specific person within the department, so I just said Exceptional Student Services Unit, guessing that somebody in that unit would probably be interviewing me. And then the date of when I wrote it. And I did know who the human resources coordinator was, and just as Natalie said, for a good tip, I found that right on the website, and there was a very brief bio about who she was. Cool. So, intro paragraph. Dear Ms. Kispert, I was excited to see the recent posting at the Colorado Department of Education for program support in the Exceptional Student Services Unit. Having grown up a twice exceptional student in Colorado, I benefited from a variety of services that this unit provides and monitors. Not only have I drawn upon these services, I have also worked with special education students while student teaching. Because of my personal and professional experiences, I believe the work Exceptional Student Services does is invaluable to our state and wish to help implement and monitor it. So you can see that I weave in a bit of a story there. I had a learning difference growing up, so I can bring that in, that I use the services they provided. And then I also had to work a lot with special education while I was teaching, so I show that connection. And I feel like it's not overly academic and not overly informal. It's kind of how you would talk about a position at the Department of Education. Any thoughts, Natalie?
No, I think that's a great intro paragraph. I mean, it immediately draws the reader in to be like, oh, this person not only cares about what we're doing, but they know about us and they experience, they either, in your case, use the services, but even if you hadn't heard of the organization before, like if there was a similar organization that you had used in a different state or a different city that you had been part of, I think that could have been added in there as well, just to say, I know what you guys are about. I experienced your, what you all do, and it, it had a good impact on my life.
Fabulous. So the second part, and these are the two paragraphs where you're kind of making a case for yourself. While student teaching, I was placed at a charter school in Tacoma Public Schools with almost 10% of its students enrolled in special education. Because U.S. history is a literacy-intensive subject, I frequently consulted parents and special education staff to develop accommodations suitable to each student's learning differences, such as allowing them to dictate papers. This experience will help me in collaborating with educators to properly provide special education services. So this again, I think, goes to the storytelling piece, and I'm not just saying, well, I know about special education. I can give a specific example of how I used it. And this position that I was applying for at the Department of Education was specifically targeting teaching English language learners and how we could restructure curriculum to better support them. And so here I'm talking about working with a literacy intensive subject and having to make accommodations for that. And this is also one of those pieces where I had not worked with a lot of English language learners, and rather than saying, I don't know how to work with English language learners, but I have worked in literacy intensive subjects. I just kind of draw on the special education, um, and yeah, I don't bring up that I don't have that experience.
Yeah, I think that's good, and also it's very clear after reading those first two paragraphs that you read whatever the job description was, you pulled from it and drew on whatever skill set they said that they were looking for, and kind of put it right into your cover letter.
Fabulous. Okay, so next paragraph about why I think they should take me. Since student teaching, I've worked in educational administration as both an intern in the Office of Innovation, Choice, and Engagement and a tutor coordinator with the I Have a Dream Foundation. I frequently use Microsoft Office products at both positions. For the Office of Innovation, for instance, I am developing Excel matrices to track connections between quality teacher standards and next-generation learning goals. As a tutor coordinator, I develop volunteer recruitment materials using PowerPoint. In addition to Microsoft Office products, I also use the CRM database Salesforce to maintain up-to-date volunteer records. These skills will help in creating pamphlets and tracking student data for exceptional student services. And a big part of the job description for this one at the Department of Education was database management, being able to develop online learning tools, and proficiency in Microsoft Office. I did not have much background in online learning tools, so that was one that I did not focus on a lot in here. But I had background in Microsoft Office, and fortunately I think everyone who's gone through school now has that background. And then I had also done a lot of work with database stuff through I Have a Dream. I would say that some parts of this, if you weren't in the field, could be a little bit jargony, like, whoa, what's he talking about with a CRM database, or, you know, quality teacher standards and next generation learning goals. Since I knew that they understood what that would be about, I think it's okay, but you definitely want to make sure, like, the audience, if you're going to use jargon, would know what your jargon was. What do you think, Natalie?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you definitely don't want to throw in a bunch of stuff just to sound good. You want to make sure that they do know what you're talking about, and so if they don't, then you need to explain within your cover letter.
Anything you would have done there, like any changes or additions?
Not no. I mean, I think it's succinct. It's one page, which I think, although we haven't said, you do not, unless they say that your cover letter should be 1 to 2 pages, you always want to make sure it's 1 page. You get right to the point, and it's clear that you did look at, their job description and what they are looking for in an applicant, and tried to highlight how you fit their role. I mean, and if it got you an interview, that's the purpose of a cover letter, so it did its job.
In the final paragraph, I tie it back to the the story of me being both a gifted student and having a special education background. And I definitely have that follow-up piece. Now, I was lucky enough to have an email address for Miss Kispert so that I could follow up with her via email. So that part of I will contact you next week to ensure receipt of my application and answer any questions you may have. Make sure you have a phone number or an email before you make that promise, or it can not actually be that great of a promise to make. And then I said all the best here, but you could have done sincerely, thank you, looking forward to meeting you, whatever that sounds like.
Yeah, and I think if you didn't have, a contact information, or if they're very clear, do not contact us, we will get in touch with you. I think you could end it with, thank you so much for considering, my cover letter and resume. I hope to hear from you soon. I think is also totally, acceptable and cordial. All right, so you have some final tips for us.
I'm off screen share, right?
Yep.
Cool. All right, so the final one kind of ties into this whole webinar that you're watching right now, and that is, don't forget it's okay to ask for help. And in fact, I strongly encourage you to ask for help. Cover letters are tough. You want to strike a balance between sounding confident but not cocky. You want to sound excited and like really interested in the position, but you don't want to sound desperate. You have to sell yourself oftentimes to a complete stranger unless you've like made some connections. So that can be kind of tricky to like, what does the stranger even want from me? But remember, current NDA alums, they're all going through it. We've been there. Your site directors have had to apply for jobs and write cover letters. The other members you're with are writing cover letters. Your professors, if you want to go there, have written cover letters. So there's all your parents. There's so many people in your lives who have written cover letters and have had to go through this job search process. And I think, it feels awkward at first to ask for help, but there's kind of this like pay it forward mindset in the business world that if you like ask, hey, I'm really interested in this position, can you tell me more? Or like, I'm trying to get into this field, can you look over a cover letter for me? I would say 8 times out of 10, somebody's going to say yes, or they'll direct you to somebody who could give you help. So yeah, really, really take advantage of the people around you as resources for looking this over and giving you that support. And don't get discouraged. If it's not the 40th cover letter, maybe it will be the 41st cover letter that gets you the job.
Was that your experience?
Yes.
Well, I'm really glad it worked out. I know you're very happy with your current job, but yeah, I agree with Rob. I mean, it takes a long time, and there are going to be a lot of cover letters that just don't get responded to, and it's very frustrating. But do not get discouraged. I know that the NDA alumni team is here to help. If you want to send us your cover letters, I know Rob certainly will be available to help. But also, reach out to your site directors or your former site directors or other alums you know. People all kind of have tips for doing this, so make sure to reach out to us because we want to help you. We want to be this sort of resource for you.
I think my email is on there just in case they want to see it or asking for it.
Yeah, so definitely email Rob, or if you want, I'll put it down underneath. You can also email alumni@ndmva.org. I will be answering it, and certainly if you have thoughts that you want us to look at or certain things, let us know. And or if you have other tips or suggestions that you want to add to this webinar, definitely send us that information, and we'll tack it on as sort of comments to the end of this webinar. Great. Well, Rob, do you have anything else you want to add?
Good luck. Happy writing. And if any of you end up coming out this way, please look up the Boulder Alumni chapter.
Awesome. All right, so one last time, that's robbiejwellington@gmail.com and or alumni@ndmva.org to send us your cover letter and or have us help you out. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, everyone. We hope you enjoyed this webinar, and feel free to email us, like we said, and or if you have other thoughts or you want to share tips related to anything really professionally about life after AmeriCorps, definitely email alumni@ndmva.org, and we can talk. Thanks again, Rob. Thank you so much for doing this. This was great.
Of course.
All right. Signing off now.
Bye.
Bye.